To move away from Parliament and all things political to something else equally important, the protection of children. Peter?
Yes, Francis. Child Protection Week in the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa is urging young mothers not to abandon their babies in places where they won't survive. There's a shocking statistic, an estimate that 2 out of 3 abandoned babies will die. The coalition says that the rate of abandonment highlights the importance of child protection strategies such as adoption. However, the rate of adoption remains very low in South Africa, with only around 1,350 adoptions taking place annually at the moment. Now, this while thousands of little ones remain without families. To help us discuss this, I'm now joined by Robyn Wolfson Vorster, who's a child protection advocate who also specialises in child abandonment and adoption. Robyn, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the programme.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, Peter.
Okay, so we're really focusing on our children this week and looking at various areas of vulnerability. And, you know, when we talk about abandonment, these are the most vulnerable first days in society, into the world, have no choice of their own. And I can't believe the statistic of 2 out of 3. But we'll get to that just now, because your journey started as an adoptive mother yourself, but your child wasn't abandoned, but you found yourself in this abandoned children space. Take us through your own journey.
Well, I am the fortunate mom of an adoptive daughter who's now 5, and when we did adopt, we adopted for family reasons. We were committed to the idea of adoption, but having gone through the process, I am an educator and a communicator at heart, and I wanted to be able to share our journey and also help people navigate the process and go through the painful journey of understanding why adoption, but also the complexity of adoption in this country. And in understanding the complexity of adoption, I came to a number of other child protection issues, and sadly, because our register of adoptable children currently has more children that are abandoned on it than children that were placed consensually, we have to talk about abandonment when we talk about adoption.
So, let's try and make that connection. You know, help me understand, why would people abandon rather than put up for adoption, knowing that people are looking for babies?
Well, it's a very contentious issue, and I think a very emotional issue, and people tend to react in judgment, but there are a lot of factors associated with abandonment. Everything from economic factors. Unfortunately, some of those children are conceived through rape and incest. We also have mothers being abandoned by their significant partners, and we unfortunately have government policy as well. So in cases where children who are under the age of 18 fall pregnant, they're not allowed to place a child for adoption without parental consent. And so if they don't want to allow their family to know that they are pregnant, they often have or feel that they've got very few options. We also have a lot of foreigners who are abandoning because they face deportation if they try and place a child for adoption consensually.
Typically, where are these children being abandoned that so many are not surviving?
Well, unfortunately, over 70% of them are being abandoned unsafely. So highest stats are around tragic stories like children who are abandoned in latrines, in drains. We've got children abandoned in open felts, and then also the awful stories about children being abandoned in rubbish dumps, in dustbins, left in plastic bags. And in many cases they die of exposure. We know that from our statistics that the Medical Research Council says that children are most likely to die in the first 6 days of life as a result of abandonment, and that's basically a natural cause of death. And
there's also a link between late-term abortions as well with abandonment.
Yeah, unfortunately, the research that's just been done by the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa has indicated that we are finding in our baby homes far more children that were born prematurely and also with significant disabilities. And sadly, that is a link to late-term abortions. So we know from statistics that have been published by Mari Stopes and others that over half of the abortions in South Africa are actually being performed illegally.
Because they're so late.
Well, just illegally.
Okay.
And then probably at least half of those, research that's been done by Loop Langbreft and others, shows that about half of those children were actually late term. So they would have been viable and they would have survived. And sometimes, tragically, they do survive and then go on to be abandoned thereafter.
All right, so we need to shift the idea that, look, okay, maybe you can't have a kid, maybe it's a difficult, but there's a lot of parents that would love to have a child. I suppose the authorities have got to make sure that the adoptions are safe, the kids end up with the right parents. Is there maybe too much paperwork, too many obstacles in the way for parents who want to adopt that are maybe contributing to this low adoption rate?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, the legislation is sound, and the screening process for screening adoptive parents is actually a fairly quick process. It's lots of legwork and admin, but it's not unreasonable in itself. Where we're finding delays in the process is actually once parents have been screened and once they're matched. And those sadly are delays that are associated with the Department of Social Development approving adoptions, and then with Home Affairs going and doing the changes of names and issuing of unabridged birth certificates.
And I suppose intercultural adoption is still a big thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it is rightly something that we need to give consideration to. It certainly is not first prize. I think across the board in South Africa, we would love black families to come forward and adopt children. But that isn't necessarily always the case, and it isn't also necessarily something which is viable for many families. Many families are looking after their own extended families already, or are not in a place financially to be able to do it.
We've run out of time, but I can't leave you without saying, what do we do?
I think I'm so glad you asked, because this particular campaign that we're running for Child Protection Week is about giving moms options. So saying to them, you don't have to abandon. You can actually contact a WhatsApp number and you can get some crisis counseling. And if you feel you've got no other option, then take your baby to a baby home. And we've listed them all over pamphlets, all over South Africa, so that you can actually find a place where you can take your child to abandon them safely.
All right, I'm going to make sure I get the website and that WhatsApp number as well, and put it out there, because I think the more options that they have, the more children that we save.
Definitely.
Robyn, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your story with us.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Okay. That was Robyn Wolfson Vorster, who's a child protection advocate, and I'll get those details for you in a short while. In the meantime,